All right, we're on. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight for our buying and selling vintage home webinar. Tonight we have Sarah Ware, the managing broker at Ware Realty Group, and Phil Gould, the owner and operator of Property Guidance Inspection, and they're going to talk about what you need to know before buying or selling your vintage home. But I want to introduce them properly in a moment after I just kind of go through how we're going to run things tonight. So the way we do this, we're going to have Phil and Sarah are going to talk from 6 to 7 tonight, and then we're going to do questions at the end. We're going to have our chat feature disabled, you'll notice, but the Q&A is where you're going to want to put all of your questions. And I'm going to go through those while they're speaking tonight. And at the end of it, I'll pull those out and we'll get through as many as we can before 7:30. Then we have a hard stop at 7:30. So 6 to 7, you'll hear them speak. I would recommend kind of waiting a little while before you plug your questions in as well, just because a lot of them are probably going to be answered along the way too. But yeah, I'll moderate that from about 7-ish to 7:30. By the way, I'm Carla Bruni with the Chicago Bungalow Association. So again, thanks for coming out. This is also being recorded, so don't worry if you don't want to like sort of frantically take notes or you miss something and you panic about it and you don't get your answer, your question answered at the end. We're going to have this, everybody who signed up is going to get an email with a link to this. And then also all these webinars live on our Facebook page too, the Chicago Bungalow Facebook page. So no worries about that. That is the beauty of technology. And again, just put everything in the Q&A as you think of it, any questions that you have. I think without further ado, I can go ahead and introduce our speakers this evening. We have Phil Gould, who's been a full-time inspector since 2012 with over 2,500 inspections completed. He's a certified member of the American Society of Home Inspectors and has earned a designation of Inspector by Review. He lives in a 1925 stucco bungalow in Forest Park. We love our speakers living in vintage homes, of course. And we have Sarah Ware. Sarah is no stranger to real estate, having earned her real estate license in 1997. While working in corporate America, she took her knowledge and left to concentrate on real estate full-time in 2007. Since then, she was a partner in one brokerage, but ultimately opened her own boutique firm in 2014. Sarah currently serves on various boards in the city of Chicago, but is most passionate about spending her time as a board member for the Chicago Bungalow Association. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago, Sarah's firm serves as one of the few firms in Chicago that holds the designation of being 100% certified MWDBE, where she works on various government contracts for the city of Chicago and state of Illinois. Though she does not live in a bungalow, she sells a lot of them and experiences some of the same things vintage owners do, since she owns an oversized Georgian in the South Shore neighborhood. We also just learned today that Sarah is the new 2021 President-elect of the Chicago Association of Realtors Board of Directors. So huge congratulations on that. That's amazing, Sarah. Again, for the few folks who also just joined since I started, questions can go in the Q&A. We're going to answer all those after Phil and Sarah speak tonight. So don't worry about that. We'll get through as many as we can before 7:30. All right, without further ado, Sarah, I believe you wanted to speak first.
Good evening. So I'm going to share my screen now. Have this down pat. So just to let everyone know that it will be somewhat of an informal conversation. I will go over at a high level of some of the things when you're buying and selling your homes. The most important thing to have is a great attitude when you're going into either situation, because older homes, sometimes we have our good days and bad days. Kind of wanted to give an overview, just some of the things that I have seen in the field. And so after I speak, I'm going to toss it off to Phil as an inspector, because he'll get into the nuts and bolts of some of the things that you can look for in the more technical side. So without further ado, I'll start. So vintage homes, sometimes you want to look at the modern homes that are out in the marketplace today, the new construction, but try to work with the feel of your property. So like you have a bungalow, you may feel a certain way, the streetscape of it as far as the window boxes and things like that. So when you're buying or when you're selling, don't try to imitate anyone else's house. Just kind of go on what you feel that you may look for from research and other opportunities and on the Bungalow Association, the website, because I use that as a great tool because I've lived in my home for about 15 years and it's still a work in progress. So know that there's a work in progress, and whether you want to sell today or 10 years from now, these are some of the things that you need to think about doing. So kitchens and bathrooms, we know that's for sale, but older homes, sometimes they have old features. It's okay to stick with the older features. Enhance the older features. Like in this kitchen, sometimes the cabinets may not be something that we want to, at first sight, say, wow, that's great, but you notice how clean it is and things like that. So I don't suggest that people start doing any pricing remodels, or because the mechanicals and things like that are what you need to pay attention to in your buying and selling. When you're living in a home, even if you're not, I tell people, don't redo your home a month before you want to sell. Enjoy your space, live in it, become one with it. That may be your style, and don't try to imitate someone else's style. Vintage style may sometimes come with some vintage character from the decorating of your home. I have a lot of old pieces that is just my style, more traditional, and you may want to embrace that. You may go to, and that sometimes will add to the character of the house, the way it looks, the way it feels, and the style. Older windows, I think Phil would probably get into some of the older mechanicals and the quirkiness of our homes. But when you are looking at buying a home, they may look like big ticket items at first, but I think that's something that you take in consideration as you are moving forward. The biggest thing is, it doesn't matter if you're buying, selling an old, new home, declutter. So notice how this house is. It's an older home, but it doesn't tell the true story of it because it is full of stuff. So when you are thinking of selling or thinking of just living in your house, try to declutter. That is the most inexpensive thing that you could do. Some paint colors that are very neutral. Sometimes embrace a bold color, whether it be a pop of color with your curtains, things of that nature. And you have to say, would I be attracted to this house? So if you wouldn't be attracted to your own house, then that's something that you would say, well, maybe someone else might not be attracted. Because in this market, I know we have things in the news. The market right now is a seller's market, meaning that sellers have a better place in the market because there are fewer homes on the market to buy than there are buyers to sell, based on various factors, whether that be interest rates, and people are just looking to buy more and try to create wealth just based on their circumstances that have changed due to COVID. Those honey-do lists, those mini repairs, please, please, please do that before they turn into something larger than life. I had a list of about 20 repairs. I'm down to about 8 or 9, but as you do them, you will alleviate a larger fix, because I have seen when people come in homes, they will see a scuff on the floor, you can't open a window, and for some reason, everyone seems to start with $10,000 as a deduction in price. I don't know where that number comes from. If they see paint on the wall or a smudge, that's a roof leak, that's $20,000. So those mini repairs that you can make up front, whether that be repairing your gutters, a minor roof repair, landscaping, things of that nature, you should do those up front, because people try to deduct the cost of your home in their mind because they look at HGTV. So even though we know HGTV is a television show that has staging and all these other things that make everything look nice and pretty, we don't want to make, the mistake of giving a false sense of hope that your house is not perfect. And so and also we live in our homes and we enjoy them a certain type of way. Everyone may not be okay with the cold water is hot, the hot water is cold, because you've lived like that for 10 years, or one eye of the stove does not work. I just sold a house and the seller couldn't understand why she'd been living in the house for 10 years, that only 3 of the eyes worked on the stove, and why the buyer didn't want to accept her home as that price. But the fix was probably less than $20. It was just like a clog, something. So things that may not be fixed today, I think you should take the time to fix those and move on and hopefully get top dollar. The outdoors, as the saying goes, if you can't get them out of the house, out of the car to your house, you can't get money out of their pocket to spend on your house. landscaping, even if it's just a few flowers, and this is pretty extensive, but it doesn't have to be this way. I have seen where just a nice cleanup, edging of bushes, of flowers, and I don't know how many people, since we're all on the bungalow page, that they are involved in the bungalow, what you call it, the contest every year, because I can't participate because I don't have a bungalow, but I do get several ideas, and also on some of the webinars that I watch. I'm now in the process of starting a native garden with just a few minor tweaks that I was actually surprised at myself that I'm a little bit better at gardening than I thought I was. Hosing down your patios, painting your railings, those are all things that we can small do lists that you won't have when. So when Phil comes, you're ready, because I don't know how many people have sold their homes, but for some reason, even though I know Phil, he is such a nice guy, he does a nice thorough inspection. Our buyers love him, but sometimes sellers are always very not as cheerful when the inspectors come by. Here, all the inspectors need to justify their price. You know, they don't know what they're doing, but you want to alleviate that just to have an overall sense of the house and the condition that it's in. As I talked about earlier, now you see how this is painted a neutral color, but it still has an older vintage style to it. I'm not saying take the style out of your house. Everyone may not like your style, but if the walls are painted orange or some other bold colors, they may not be as attractive. But you see how they spruce things up with different colors in their furniture that is going with them, and their curtains that's going with, that may or may not go with them as well. But they did a nice sense of style with very neutral palettes. Clean, very basic, things like that. Those are all one-stop shop things that we can do to kind of help us along. Now, some of the major problems, now we look at all the things that we can look at from a cosmetic, but what are the real drawbacks sometimes that people are not turned on to buying an old house? Fortunate for me, I grew up in an older home, so I understood some of the pitfalls, but as a buyer, what should you look for, and as a seller, what should you be concerned about? Can't see the screen. So some of the things that come up in older homes: foundation issues, roofs. They could have older homes, they may have a slate or a tile roof that costs sometimes in the six figures. It could be a landmark property. If it's before 1978, if it's built, you may have lead-based paint that need to be, properly painted. Radon or carbon monoxide may be an issue from old HVAC equipment. The biggest thing is the electrical and the plumbing may be out of date. Energy efficient. That's why at the Bungalow Association, they do a lot of retrofits for seniors, and the roof, they do the winterizing and the energy efficiency that may come with that. Old mechanicals, incomplete or outdated projects, because I grew up in a house with my mother. She did not know what a handyman was. My father, he always started a bunch of projects, and as good as that may be, sometimes it's a detriment to, because you're starting several projects and not finishing them. So if you have a buyer coming in looking at all these things, in addition to being an older home, that may be something that is a cause of concern. Now, I'm not saying that all these things are reasons not to buy an older home, because the pros may be, my house is an older home. I have the original hardwood flooring that was covered up with carpeting. I refinished that. I have plaster walls. It may not be as efficient, but it's a sturdier build. It's all brick. So it's positive to that, but I did have to replace my electrical. And when I updated the bathroom, some of the plumbing was outdated with old plumbing pipe. My windows have been replaced. So not to say that it's a money pit, but sometimes you do have to go in with the thought process. This is not perfect. I can start with a good palette. It has good bones. I've had tuck pointing done. I've rebuilt my chimney. Even though now that I'm saying all these things, I'm trying to figure out, like, why did I buy this house? But I knew when I walked in my house, I loved every minute of it. And when I go into newer homes, I'm not as enamored with some of the build. And so partially, if your house, if your home has a lot of problems cited in the inspection. So as a real estate professional, I have many sellers and buyers. When the inspection time comes, we get the inspection list of some of the recommendations. So depending on the price that you're getting the house for and some of the budget renovations, and I will say, if you don't want to do the budget and if you don't want to do the updates and you want to sell your home, it may be a good idea to have a contractor, a licensed professional come in, give you some pricing around certain projects, because even though you may not want to get it done, you can hire somebody to come in, and then if somebody wants to potentially buy it, you can kind of give them a guesstimate as to, okay, I've got the electrical updates to do, I have some plumbing updates to do, roof, things like that. If you're getting it for a good deal and you know you may have to put in $15,000, $20,000 and you can price it accordingly, it may end up being, a win-win for both. That's not to say that this should turn you off, but if you want something move-in ready, sometimes that may not be the best fit for you. So you may want something that's already renovated. Now in the city of Chicago, where I live, we have a lot of renovations that some are better than others. As a real estate professional, I've shown a lot, some that I know that may not be the best quality. And I'm sure Phil has inspected some that they probably didn't know what they were doing. So you have to be on the lookout if they have renovated it for you. That was one of the reasons I wanted to renovate my home, because I wanted to make sure that I hired the right contractors, the right professionals and I was ensured that the work was done properly. So everyone does not have that type of time, or they may not be in their budget, but those are some of the pitfalls of buying an older home. But I saw it as an opportunity, because everything in my home I pretty much picked out myself. I know what's done. I haven't had any issues, because if there's something, then I know who to call or what was done behind the wall. So before I give it over to Phil, I just want people to consider that no house is perfect. When you're selling a house, you're not selling a perfect house. You're not buying a perfect house. Bring your imagination, because there are endless possibilities when you have a neutral palette, and you keep smiling, because even through it all, because I think when you have an older home, it's sometimes an adventure. I don't look at when something fell off my ceiling due to some plumbing I had done. You just have to keep smiling and you roll with the punches. Now, that was my presentation. I want to turn it over to Phil, because I saw his presentation and I kind of scaled mine back, because he gets into the nuts and bolts, and I wanted to give him more time. But this is my contact information. I will be on for Q&A afterwards, but I want to turn it over to Phil to kind of talk about the actual inspection process.
Oh, sorry, Phil, I think you're actually still muted. And thank you, Sarah. And just so everybody knows, that garden contest is the Treehouse garden contest. Yeah, Treehouse Awards.
Treehouse Awards. I was like,
I did like a little too soon, and you'd start talking again. But thank you so much. And yeah, Phil, whenever you're ready. Looks like you're unmuted now.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Let me share my screen here. All right. So yeah, my name is Phil Gould. I've been an inspector for about 9 years. And one thing that I'm always amazed by is I see how often I see the same things, or very common kind of issues. So I thought if I shared, some of those things that I just see all the time, and they're not too difficult for a seller to potentially, fix, kind of like what Sarah talked about, take care of the small stuff, then buyers, don't get as anxious. And my approach is to do a good job for the buyer, but also be fair to the house, especially if it's an older home, of things that were allowed when the home was built versus, what's done now, modern standards. Oh, here, all right, I need to, got people in my, put that down. All right. So common inspection issues, whether you're getting ready to sell your home or looking to buy, there are some issues that often come up. And then as a seller, you could choose to repair or disclose a given issue. Honesty is the best policy. And if you can reduce surprises by the buyers as they're coming through, like we might see a foundation crack and a person might be really concerned about that foundation crack. But if the seller already said that it was there, then, you know, everyone's a little more anxious or a little more relaxed about it. And then if you have some work done by contractors and you share those receipts, that can really, you know, help make people more comfortable. So we can start at the foundation. Foundation cracks can be worrisome, but most cracks could be seepage, but not necessarily structural. And that's always a question that a buyer would have. Like, is this a structural issue? Is the house falling down? And I should note that I'm not a structural engineer, but I've done a number of classes for home inspection with engineers. And what they've shared is cracks that are vertical and not very wide and not out of plane, in other words, front to back, are usually not a structural concern. Whereas cracks that are horizontal, wider, or get larger at one end may or may not indicate a structural issue. And if you chose to, you could have a foundation contractor or structural engineer look at things, and then, you know, they could provide more of an opinion. And if that's something that you could share with the buyers, that could help them feel better about it. And then continuing with foundations. So most bungalows have basements, but sometimes there's a crawl space often built under a porch at the back where they take an outdoor space and incorporate it indoors, and then there's a crawl space underneath it. And modern building science recommends incorporating crawl spaces into the conditioned envelope. So if there are vents, you close them to the exterior, add insulation at the perimeter walls. Often they insulate it in the ceiling of the crawl space instead, and you just take that insulation out and then cover the floor with a plastic membrane to limit moisture from the soil, and then add a duct for heating and cooling if you can do that. And that, you know, that would help make the indoor air quality better also in the home. At exterior, grading and walkways should slope away from the building. This actually happens to be a bungalow there on the left, and there was evidence of moisture coming in at the basement wall just on the other side of, this was next to the front steps of the home. And you could fairly easily just fill in some soil there and, you know, have it slope back out toward the front of the yard, and that would, you know, be an easy fix. And then on the right, we have a photo of what we call a gap at hardscape, where the walkway or a patio meets the side of the building. And this one happens to slope toward the home. So they have some caulking or roofing cement that kind of lines this gap, and then that can keep water out from entering the foundation. And then also with the exterior, it's my understanding with lenders such as the FHA and VA that peeling paint can be an issue that can hold up the loan. And there's also some suburbs that that do their own inspection as a transaction, a home changing hands, and they require that peeling paint be addressed. And then of course lead safe practices as you're painting things away. And then Sarah had also mentioned just repairing any rotting trim, siding, just sprucing things up at the exterior can really help. A lot of bungalows are masonry walls, and they were really built to last, and they can take a lot of deferred maintenance, but once it's time to do masonry work, it can be mortar replacement and sometimes brick replacement. And One thing that I often see is Chicago common wall our masonry walls are repaired with the wrong type of mortar. It's more of a gray color is the wrong kind. The correct kind of mortar is more of a tan or a brownish, and it's softer than the brick. So over time, 5 years, 10 years, as cracks develop, it it's the mortar that gives way versus the bricks, because that's a much easier repair for freeze thaw cycles. And then steel lintels, which is the support over windows and doors, those expand as they rust, which can cause stair step cracking, and eventually the lintels can fail and need to be replaced. Just an example, most roofs are shingles. So there's 3-tab is something that you see a lot. That's the one on the left. And then architectural grade shingles is an example of those on the right. So this is the average lifespan, and it may be something that you want to be aware of, like how old is your roof, and if that's something that you could share with the buyer and the inspector, or if you're buying a home, you would want to get a sense of the age. As an inspector, I try to give something along the lines of a roof is in the first third, middle third, last third. There's some signs of wear that we can check for to see kind of where we think it is in that cycle, and then you can get a sense of how much more time you have before the roof is replaced. And there are some insurance companies, from what I understand, want to know if a roof has at least 2 years left in it. So if you know that you're in the first third or middle third of either type of this roof, either type of shingle, that you would be able to tell your insurance company that you have you have the 2 years left. And then we also see other kinds of roof, tile and slate, and signs of wear with a shingle roof, cupping, curling, granule loss. And then it's the south and west sides of roofs that tend to wear out more quickly. There are times where I've seen hip roofs on a garage where you can just automatically tell which are the west and south sides, even if I didn't know which direction was north, because of how much more worn out those two faces are. Ideally, only one layer of shingles, although it's not uncommon to see a second layer. And that's something I always want to tell a buyer about, if there are more than one layer of shingles, because that could be more expensive to dispose of it, because you can't put a third layer. You can put a second layer on the first layer, but you wouldn't put a third layer on the second layer of shingles. Gutters, this is a pretty easy one. You can check gutters and exterior drainage during a heavy rain. I'd encourage you to get on your rain jacket and walk around your house when it's raining really hard, and just see what's happening. You see where the water's going, if any is spilling out of the gutters. Look for leaks at the seams, and then see if water is collecting or ponding in any areas. And then gutters should be cleaned periodically. With bungalows, it's a little easier to get up there yourself with a ladder. If it's a story and a half up, versus Sarah's Georgian would be, quite a bit higher, maybe hire somebody to do that. And a lot of water issues in basements are caused by gutters and water that collects near the foundation. So you could save yourself, hiring U.S. waterproofing, or, another foundation contractor like that, because they're more likely to want to sell you a solution that they, provide, which in some cases is appropriate. But if you could start with just, making sure all the water gets managed. And then one thing that is outside of the scope of a home inspection related to gutters is gutter guards. So I just note if they're there or not. And there's some kind of cheaper plastic type that we had on our house when we bought it. We're in a story-and-a-half bungalow, and the neighbor had a tree with these red seeds that were slightly smaller than the round holes in the gutter guards that we had. And so my gutters were 3/4 full before I really realized it. We had bought in January, and then, you know, kind of the spring rains came. So I ended up just taking all of those plastic gutter guards off, and just I prefer to just clean the gutters and keep them clean. We were sitting on our front porch before we did all that, and it was like being on the inside of a waterfall. Just the water was just flowing. You know, the gutters were really not doing much of anything for us. And then also clean the outside of the gutter. So here there's a little bit of debris inside, this is the same gutter, by the way, just inside outside picture. There wasn't that much debris in here. Oh, and these are those little seeds that were in our gutters, these little round kind of reddish. But like the first sign when I walk around and I see the picture on the right where there's the drip marks, you know, that tells me that the gutters either are full or were full, and you can see the tree in the background dropping all those leaves. But you know, while you're up there cleaning the gutters, if you want to just scrub the outside off a little bit, make people a little less concerned about that. For attics, the attic hatches should be accessible. There's some times where we have to spend extra time at the inspection, which I'm happy to do, cleaning out a closet, you know, taking clothes out and the boxes or something, just to be able to set up the ladder to get to the hatch that's usually in a closet upstairs. And then we check the insulation and ventilation. And then one thing to really look for is bath fans and kitchen fans terminating inside the attic. So 25 years ago, it was a very common practice for the bathroom fan and sometimes kitchen fan to extend up toward the peak of the roof inside the attic and just discharge near an exhaust vent, you know, just a passive box vent kind of thing. But you can get mold and deterioration of the wood sheathing that's right around that vent. So it really should be a continuous closed pipe to a vent cap that's designed for that. If it goes out the roof, or it could go out a sidewall. And then here's a quick tip, either for if you're leaving, if you're staying in your home, or you could do this for the inspection. A typical attic hatch loses a lot of heating and cooling through the hatch cover, because it's, you know, just a single piece of wood. So you could add some insulation, like a 3-inch foam board, and just glue it to the top, and then do some weather stripping around the edge. And that's a pretty easy project. To do. For heating, here's a couple thermal image pictures, which is always an interesting thing to do on a home inspection. So these are hot water radiators, which is probably the most common to see in a bungalow if it's not forced air. The other type would be steam radiators, which I think are a little less common in bungalows. But so on the left is what a radiator should look like that's heating up well. It's a little more yellow, which is hotter at the top of it, and you know, the heat is making its way up and out. And then the photo on the right is there's air trapped in the top of the radiator, and it tends to be the tallest radiator in the house or the tallest radiator on a floor. So it's often in a bathroom, and I'm pretty sure, well, this was in someone's office. I remember where this one was. So it's a matter of the hot water can't get into this radiator because all this air is trapped in the top. So, and if you have radiators now, you're probably familiar. So when the boiler is operating, you can use a special key or a screwdriver depending on the type of valve, air relief valve, and just let that air out slowly. Use a towel to catch any water, and you can just kind of hear it sort of hissing, and then you get all that out. I've had it. It's really quickly that this happens. So if I notice one on an inspection, I can release the air, and then I can come back in 10 or 15 minutes, and a radiator that looked like the one on the right pretty much looks like the one on the left. You know, so we can verify. I think it makes buyers more comfortable to, you know, realize that, hey, that is really not an issue, that we were able to, you know, solve it. And then they can do it every fall. So for steam radiators, they generally use a one pipe system where the steam enters in the top half of the pipe and then condenses and gives off its heat at the radiator, and then the water drains back. And often these radiators are not pitched correctly, and so it ends up being water that's stuck in the one corner of the radiator, and then the steam can't get in. And as I'm looking at this little pocket level, I'm realizing this was just a couple days ago. I left that right there, so that my level is sitting in that person's house, which they probably thought that was interesting to come home to. For cooling, there is an older style of refrigerant called R22, or sometimes HCFC 22, which as of a year ago, January, was phased out. So it's becoming less and less available. So that's something that I think is important for buyers to know. And maybe as a seller, you would also want to at least be aware of that. It's much more difficult and expensive to have that equipment serviced versus you would be more likely to want to replace it rather than put a bunch of money into an older style system. So I don't know if I have a pointer that works well, but here it's real small letters, but you can just see the word R22 on this. And this air conditioner happened to be 2002, so it was 19 years old, so probably time to replace it. And then also for forced air heating and cooling, I like to take the grills or the covers off of a radiator. This happens to be a floor radiator or a floor register in a bathroom, and you can see all these gaps around the edge of it. So a lot of the heat is being lost in the cavity between the joists versus coming out into the room. And what would have been better is for this register boot to have been installed such that it really helped the air make it all the way out. So as a fix, you could use metal tape and kind of seal this all up, or you could have a HVAC person add a couple inches of sheet metal just at the edges of the ductwork. Humidifiers. So everybody knows to change their air filter for a forced air furnace, and often the humidifier pads are forgotten. So these should be swapped out once a year, or maybe a little more often if you use the humidifier a lot. And then I really like this style of humidifier because you can tell when the damper is open or closed with this bypass damper lever there on the left. And then in the summer, you want to be sure to turn off the humidistat and then put this to the summer setting, which is where it is now as being closed. For electrical, this is really common to see junction boxes that have been left uncovered, either in basement ceilings often or in garages, sometimes in attics where kids can get to them if they choose to play in there. And this is, these are energized wires, so that's pretty dangerous. And for the cost of a 99-cent cover plate, there's one over here on the left too that was also missing the cover. And then outlets and switches should be covered behind appliances. I pull the stove out and I pull the refrigerator out when I can see behind those types of appliances, and it's not unusual to see the cover plate missing. Or sometimes where the microwave and exhaust fan plugs in above a cooktop or a stove, and that's also, those are $1 a piece or something. It helps buyers to feel better when things are like covered, things like that are covered over. At one point, closet lights were common to be bare bulbs, 20 years, 30 years ago. A 100-watt incandescent bulb can get to be 130 degrees. So you could bake your sweaters. So it's better to swap this out for a covered fixture. And, that's not a expensive or difficult repair. They also make a type of fixture that you can take out the bulb and screw that fixture right into the bulb socket, and it looks like a fixture that has a covered globe. And then it's not unusual to see burned out bulbs, and kind of like Sarah mentioned, like, oh, well, one of the 3 burners doesn't work on the stove. I don't understand what the big deal is. But if it's easy enough to fix it, then we have a better sense of what switches control which lights and things like that. Electrical panel should be readily accessible, and as a seller, if you're getting ready for the home inspector to come, if you have some of these things moved out of the way, you can get your house back faster by making it easier to get in. And because what a home inspector does is take off these 6 panel screws and then look at all the wiring inside. So a couple of days ago, I was in this house where there was a stack of buckets behind a wall next to a door, a bifold door, and then the clothes washer was here, and then there was a laundry sink, and then this is the electric panel up here on the wall. So we ended up pulling all these buckets out, and I crawled over that washer and then leaned over that laundry sink and then took out those screws and looked at it. The buyer was actually trying to talk me out of doing it, but I thought it was important to do, and it took a little more time, but it was a good thing to have done. For plumbing, if you're in a bungalow, you may very well have a lead water service line, common before 1985. And the way to identify it, if you want to know what you have, is it would be a gray pipe versus copper colored, and then a gray pipe could either be galvanized steel or lead, and then you can tell by this bulge in the pipe if it's lead. Or you could also very carefully, because lead is softer, if you carefully pressed against it with the edge of a screwdriver blade and it you can make an indentation, then you also know that it's a lead pipe. And then it's quite common actually to not have a water meter in an older home, and buyers are often surprised, like, what do you mean I don't have a water meter? You got to have a water meter everywhere. And it's my understanding that you pay a lower bill generally, and that you can request from the utility, like, hey, can you bump me up on the list to have a meter put in, because they're just kind of working their way around. So that would be, especially if you're a smaller household, would probably be, you know, some money savings there. And then galvanized water lines are common, and the water flow becomes restricted. This was actually from my own house. I asked the plumber to save me a piece of it once we had everything replaced. So that's some minerals building up. And we knew that we needed to do it when we did the inspection of our own house. And we just thought it would be a 2 or 3 year down the road project, and it ended up being in the first few months, because I do the laundry in our house, and I started laundry at 7 in the morning, and my wife would go to take a shower at 7, and she'd be yelling down, "Turn off the washer." So we bumped that project up. So pipes for hot water are usually worse, since the minerals build up more so in the hot pipes because of temperature. So one of the checks that you could do at home, and something that I would do as an inspector, is like I go in the kitchen sink or the bathroom sink, and I turn on hot only and look at it, and then turn on cold only and look at it. And if they're quite different, then that indicates to me that there's restriction in the galvanized piping on the hot side. And then also more testing that's done is turn the shower on to a temperature that is reasonable, or that you would have, and then in the same bathroom, flush the toilet a couple times, turn the hot water and then the cold water on at the faucet at the sink, and watch to see if anything changes with the volume of water at the shower, temperature wise, or how much water is coming out. And then for galvanized pipes, the horizontal pipes usually are more restricted than the vertical pipes. And often plumbers will, when you come in and you say, "Oh, we need to change all this out," they may say, "Well, why don't we start with the horizontal first and live with that for a couple of months, and then, you know, call me if you know it's not what you want." Another really common one, dishwasher drain lines. In Illinois, you're not allowed to connect the dishwasher drain line to the disposal, because the concern is that the disposal could send debris back into your clean dishwasher and dishes, which is a bacteria potential issue. And I think that this happens often by installers of appliances from the big box appliance stores, where they have 12 appointments for the day, so they need to get in and out, and that's the easiest way for them to hook it up, so they do it that way. And then also you want to have what they call a high loop at the dishwasher drain line, which also prevents water from the kitchen sink making its way into the dishwasher. For stoves, stoves are required to have a bracket to keep it from tipping forward if a child were to stand on the door, or something heavy were to be placed on the door. And I've tried to keep track of it, but I think it's about 1 out of every 50 houses. So almost never is there an anti-tip bracket in place. This actually has the bracket. It's down there at the right. So as the stove is moved backwards, the back foot just kind of slides into that U-shaped bracket and keeps it from tipping forward. These brackets are probably $20, and if you're handy, it's not that difficult to install. And then other common issues with stoves, the bulb can be burned out in the oven. Just replace the bulb. And clogged orifices in burners. A lot of times, if it's a 5 burner with like an oval shaped center for a griddle, that tends to get pretty clogged. So just soak it in the hot soapy water for a little bit, and the whole thing should help. And then stove wobbling, which you can just adjust one of the feet. You could do that with a laundry too, washer dryer. Toilets, they should be secure at the floor and not move side to side or front to back. And if it's a little loose, you could maybe just tighten the bolts to it. And if it's really loose, then you want to have a plumber reset it and remove the toilet, look at the floor around it to make sure it's not damaged or deteriorated. If water has been leaking out around the seal and you're not able to really see it. And then also occasionally toilets run continuously and it's such a small amount that the seller may not even really be aware of it. But you can save water by repairing that. Tub and shower, these are also really common. The intersection of the tub spout and the wall, you can get water to get down between that gap, and that's really easy. Just a little bit of caulking around, either the color of the tile or clear caulking. And that's one last thing. And then the corners of shower walls with tile should really be sealed with color matched caulking instead of grout, because the grout is more likely to crack over time. So that's something that I recommend as an upgrade if there's not cracking, or I recommend it be repaired if there is cracking. Bathroom sinks, the stopper should function. This one came off in my hand, so the lever works if I just pull on that small part, but it should be connected in there. And then I only do this in vacant homes. This happened to be a vacant house. There's a little bit of cleaning solution there, but I splash water up under the undermount sink and look to see if water ends up in the bottom of the cabinet, which this was new construction, so they needed to have their person come back through and fix that. If it's an occupied house, I have a laminated plastic card that I try to gently slide between the countertop and the undermount sink, either at a bathroom or kitchen. And sometimes you can just push the card all the way through. It's not caulked at all. And then this is also really, really common. So for dryer vents, this is a foil vent connector, which is much more likely to collect lint in those folds. So you started out with a 4-inch round duct that then becomes much smaller than that over time. And so the best thing to do would be to replace it with a rigid, this is flexible metal type of piping here. Just switch it out. And for new construction, and it's been some years, this is actually what's required in Chicago. For stairs, every bungalow has stairs that used to look like this, or maybe still do, where the railing just comes down the side. And it really should have vertical balusters to keep kids and pets from, jumping off there. So 4-inch sphere anywhere in the baluster part, and then a 6-inch below the bottom rail. We doing for time, all right. And then steps should be no more than 7 3/4 inch high and be within 3/8 of a difference in height. And I don't get the tape measure out necessarily, but I know that my flashlight is just under 9 inches tall. So this step was more or less right. And this was the first step down from the kitchen to go downstairs, and that's just way too high. This is a difficult and expensive repair, but it's something that that a buyer should at least know about and decide if they want to ask for a credit or have it repaired, or what they might want to do. Windows, I know that there's lots of seminars on that, so I won't spend a ton of time. This is actually at my house in a project I'm trying to work on at our back porch, where the sash ropes are missing on the one side. So that's often the case. Older windows, or glazing putty that needs to be done. Either you can take it on as your own project, or hardware stores can often replace that. And then with doors, I don't make this too much of a thing, but I want to at least let buyers know if doors rub on the jamb, or they don't latch, or swing closed. These are all things to be expected with an older home. And then sometimes bathroom doors don't have a lock, or people like privacy in a bathroom. All right. So these are some common inspection issues. Some of these things can be done easily. Minor repairs help things go smoothly, and buyers can feel better if the more it's maintained, the more comfortable they can be. And so that's my contact info if you have any questions later. We'll take questions now.
Great, thank you so much, Phil. Just a reminder to everybody too, this is recorded, so don't worry if you miss stuff. Everyone who signed up is gonna get an email with a link to the recording, and it lives on our Facebook page too. Also, I just wanted to say, well, a few things. First of all, thank you for confirming that gutter guards are not all they're cracked up to be, Phil, because people always ask about them, and it's like, no one is like given a concrete, like shown like how, they can be problematic, but it's always like, yeah, when stuff gets stuck in there, like you can't really clean it out. Like it's hard to know what's stuck in there. It's hard to get in there, and stuff gets stuck in there, So thank you for that, along with those thermal imaging images of radiators, which I also had never seen. So that was exciting for me. We do a home maintenance. I usually am the one to lead a home maintenance webinar that we do. And when I teach it, I have considerably less dignity than Phil, and I'm trying to pantomime and do like ridiculous things. So we have a booklet that we actually created with an illustrator that can show you a lot of the stuff that Phil was talking about when he was talking about those home maintenance things, like the first half of the presentation. So if you go to our website, chicagobungalow.org, and you click on how to, there's a free maintenance 101. You can download it as a PDF. So it's just a really handy thing to have around and to kind of understand what some of these concepts are a little bit more and see them listed out and see these drawings of what's really going on. We also did a how-to home series, which is, we have all different videos of things you can do around the house, including masonry, which Phil talked about. I'm a big masonry geek, and we did like 4 different videos involving like what to look for and how to take care of historic masonry and stuff like that. So, so yeah, definitely check those out too as sort of a supplement to some of the stuff that was talked about tonight. All right, we have few questions here.
Can I say one thing, 2 things?
Oh yeah, sure, Sarah, sure.
Just 2, so gutters is a hot topic for people that may live alone. So Windy City Gutter Cleaning, you go online, they will come out to clean your gutters, and they look online to see what it looks like, give you an estimate of that. And also when Phil was talking about his inspection, he kind of touched on if a seller gets an inspection. So sellers can get an inspection prior to selling their house, because the last thing you want is someone like Phil coming in and giving you pages and pages of everything that's wrong with your house. But know that if there is something wrong, that like asbestos and anything like that, I saw that in one of the questions, you do have to disclose that if you don't remedy it. Or sometimes you may just want to know, like I have my original inspection from 15 years ago. I still look at it today. You may want to have it just as a note, just to kind of keep a document handy when people come. I wouldn't say give it to the buyer, but just know that these are things you can take care of over time.
Great points, yeah. Okay, all right, let's just go through these one by one then, because we don't have too many yet. I have a rather idiosyncratic yard with no grass, lots of flowers and native plants. Should we replace when it's time to sell or wait for the appreciative buyer?
I mean, why wouldn't you want to enjoy your yard now and get into the tree house award? I mean, I'm a proponent of enjoy your house while you're there. You can let the new person appreciate, I mean, to enjoy it, but I will say landscaping is, that does boost up the value, and the curb appeal just for more people, you know, because that's the first thing, everyone online, that is the first picture of your house. So either or works, but you price it accordingly. But I would just say, try to, you know, because go to a nursery, I know some nurseries, if you take a picture of what you have, they'll kind of help you along with, like, if you know how much sun gets, you know, like start small though, like a few little, you know, bushes here and there.
And do you think, Sarah, that are people typically wanting more grass, or are people sometimes like kind of really into native since they've been like more of a thing the last decade or so? Or like maybe a hybrid of the two, you know?
Well, I'm trying to go more native because I just cutting the grass is just, you know, I wouldn't say I'm over it. I've seen some native yards that look really nice. Like sometimes people think it looks like a bunch of weeds, like I used to, but when you see them and then you start adding on little by little, I think it looks pretty nice. But then you have some that want to put concrete just to have an entertainment space on the back. So it's a mix, but people, if they have kids, they want grass though. If they have children or small children, they want somewhere to play and to enjoy, especially living in the city of Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Our home inspection reports all standard. I wasn't sure if there was a set report that gets used, at least in Illinois. She's seen them reports kind of all over the place. Some mention the age of the mechanicals, some have detailed pictures, some seem to have been worded by the buyer themselves and request random repair items. So is it kind of like you put your own stamp on it when you're out there as an inspector?
So Illinois is a licensed state. There's 34 states in the country that have a licensed law and a set of standards that we're required to meet. I think most inspectors would say that those are minimal standards versus maybe some other states. So almost every inspector I know exceeds the standards in one or more ways. But where it gets unusual probably is we do it in different ways. Like if someone was an electrician, they spend a lot more time in that area. If somebody used to be a plumber, then that half their report might be, you know, plumbing. And so I think I'm more thorough than some, and I know there's some inspectors that are even more thorough than I am. So it's like a balance. Can you really be 6 hours in a three bedroom single family home? I mean, the sellers are like, you know, when do I get my house back? But you know, I try to give as much information as I can about a home so that there's no surprises 6 months or a year, or gee, I wish my inspector would have told me about whatever the thing is, even if I don't think it's a big issue. Like I think it is important to, I think we're required to list the age. I guess I always do, but I also try to say the average life of a furnace is 20 years and yours is 16 years, you know, just so somebody has a sense of like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't remodel the kitchen yet until I say that back.
Right. And there are certain things like I just had a question because it's one that I feel like I've heard debate about over the years. Like you do have to disclose if there's been a fire, for example, in the house at some point, right?
I don't know. I mean, I look for evidence that there was a fire, usually in the attic, and if there was, I mention it. But Sarah would know more about the disclosure piece, I guess.
Not necessarily a fire, but the insurance report that will come up when people are trying to get insurance. So that's not really on the disclosure. Most inspectors catch it, but if it's been repaired, and it depends on what the replacement was, but when you go to get new insurance, it comes up depending on how long ago it was, but they may not be able to insure it as much depending on what the fire was. So you may have to do a little bit more, but the insurance report will tell that. Just like when people get insurance, it tells you like if you keep calling the police for burglaries and things like that. So that's how sometimes people don't want to use their insurance company because it may pass on.
Got it. Okay. Okay, for vintage houses, especially those within historic districts or landmarked buildings, are there specific inspection items that might be okay, but not actually meet the current code?
For vintage houses.
I think it would really, I think it's like what can be grandfathered in, I guess, but also with this added layer, like if it's a local landmark building.
Oh,
I
right.
still think
Yeah.
you need the same.
So,
So, and well, and like for instance, Jackson Park Highlands, it's landmark. So when they have work done, it has to go through zoning because it's landmark. So I know, because my aunt lived there, and so her neighbor wanted to get a new roof, but it had to be the original roof. So it can't, it's not a certain type of inspection. They just may have different layers of approval depending on if it's for the exterior. Mostly landmarks are for the exterior of the home, certain windows, roofs, things like that. So not necessarily inspection, but you can't just like I maybe just put a roof on my house because I want one. But a landmark area, they have to go through City of Chicago zoning department to make sure that things are done up and up. And most landmark areas, neighbors are really diligent about if they see someone getting work done, they will call the city.
Well, it'll flag a review if it's a local landmark, not if it's a National Register district. All of our bungalow districts are National Register districts, so they don't have any protocol.
Not those.
But if it's a local Chicago landmark, of which there are far fewer,
yes,
they have a much more rigorous criteria to be listed as a Chicago landmark. But I still think that health and safety would be the same across the board. I don't think you can really mess with that. Interesting question though. Okay. Okay. I just learned that I have asbestos on the water supply line from just inside the house to the water heater area. It's behind a drop ceiling, which is why I didn't notice it before. Should I have it removed before trying to sell or let the buyer deal with it? I wouldn't be surprised if the buyer will do a gut rehab. Several have occurred around me. So obviously he's hoping that the buyer will do a gut rehab.
And so he can't sell it as is, but he just has to disclose that there are asbestos now that he knows it is. And price, I'm sure price according, especially if there are a lot of rehabs, people may be waiting for that, if he got a price or an estimate as to what it would cost, that would be helpful so he would know how to price it. Because some people like Phil was showing a cover wall plate 99 cents. Oh, that's $10,000. Oh, asbestos. Then they say, oh, so I would just get a realistic price because a contractor would know a realistic price, but they can sell it as is, as long as they disclose what's wrong with the price.
yeah, I think waterline piping, unfortunately, is one of the more expensive things about asbestos remediation. Like if you have there's a tape that they used to seal forced air furnace ductwork with, and that's really cheap. They just pull everything, they just take it all out, asbestos and all the rest, and just replace the ductwork. But the piping is where it could potentially be more expensive. And there are some plumbers that won't work on it unless the asbestos is taken out. Mm. Like if you needed to have galvanized pipe replaced, you may have to have the asbestos removed first. Okay. But as long, like Sarah said, as long as you disclose it, I mean, I'll just note that it's there.
Okay. What about tread depth? I know that's big in older homes. I have one in the basement. I think one, stairway in the basement exit that's shallow because of the way the door was installed. I'm not sure if it needs fixing in order to sell the house.
Yeah. Tread should be 9.5 inches deep, I think, in Chicago. And so maybe there's one that's just less. I don't know. I don't think I would make a very big deal of it, especially if it's, trying to make the best of a bad situation of, well, you've got this door and you've got the step, and if there's a way to fix it easily, then maybe do that. But
okay. And even if the whole stairway, even if the risers are short along like consistently, because, like your grandfather and great uncle built it, you know what I mean, back in the 40s or something, is it something that's really an issue?
Yeah, I just want
the buyer, the buyer, whoever the buyer is. So, it may not be an issue for 10 people, but one person who wants to pay the most money, but any house can be sold for any price. But that's not one of the major issues at that top of the inspection chain.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
It's obviously not mandatory to fix it. So, okay. Okay, if a roof is on the older side but still functional with no water leakage, etc., should a seller expect buyers to want a roof replacement just because of age?
Buyers want new everything. If they see one curl on a roof, they want a feel. I mean, when you live in an older home, you just learn how to deal with things. That's when you fix things. You can have a roof certification done and maybe give the buyer some sort of comfort. But if the inspector puts anything that says roof, they want to hold the roof. That's just for the most part. Unless they're getting a great deal, unless it's like multiple offers, like now they may not want a roof, but they still want some comfort in knowing that the roof was fixed properly. So if you have receipts on what you did, things like that, that should be sufficient. But a lot of, especially first-time home buyers, they just want, when they hear roof, they just want a new roof. And I don't know if Phil, you want to elaborate on that, because everyone I'm sure asks you about the roof first.
Yeah, it generally does come up, which is why I try to do the first third, middle third, last third. And then if I say, if to me it appears to be the first or middle, then everybody's like, well, okay. And if there's something minor, I try to be as specific about it as I can. Like there are 3 shingles that are damaged on the south side of the garage versus, like, I don't know, just shingles generally, then like Sarah's saying, they imagine it's 20 and then it becomes 30. And then by Saturday it's, 50.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Okay. My 8-foot by 30-foot front porch has a concrete floor, steps, and 4 roof pillars, probably not original, that are sinking and pulling away from the house. There's a 1/2-inch crack between the concrete porch floor and the wall of the house. Is it possible to slab jack that much concrete?
Yeah, I don't have any idea. I'm thinking that it could be done, but the only way to know really would be to have it estimated. I know that some concrete jacking folks would much rather work on a sidewalk that's just out in the yard all by itself, as opposed to something that's next to a garage or next to a house. It gets a little dicier if you don't have a lot of clearance in terms of what you're lifting, but that's one person. We had a walkway that was settling next to a garage in a condo building that I lived in years ago, and I met somebody at a seminar for home inspector education, and I wanted that guy to come out and fix our sidewalk like he said, and he said, yeah, this is next to a garage, and it isn't something that we would do. So there may be people that do it, but I don't know.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, that's a good question too. Do you need gutters for detached garages?
I suggest that they be added. I would say that it's maybe 1 out of 3 garages has gutters, so it's less common, but it's just one of those like advice kind of. It would be better for the slab. You're less likely to have the garage floor crack if you have gutters.
That's on my wish list. That's one of my wish lists. I haven't gotten to the garage yet, so that's one of my to-do list item before I sell my house.
Well, and also, I mean, there's a way, it's sometimes harder because they're right on the alley usually, but to get those downspouts running away from the foundation of the garage too, so the garage isn't taking on all that water, and also rotting out, especially with older brick ones. But yeah, for sure. Okay, I think, okay, yeah, I think we got through all of our questions. Huzzah, excellent. You guys are amazing. All right. Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to cover, or anything else you wanted to say or plug this evening before we close out?
No, I guess not.
All right.
I mean, thanks for attending, and just
Yeah,
take
thank
care
you.
to the old bungalow, and thanks for the Bungalow Association for having me.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This was really helpful. This was wonderful. Have lovely evenings. Thanks to everybody who attended. Again, we have a recording that'll be available. Angela will send an email out to everybody with that link, and it'll also be on Facebook. We've got some more seminars coming up this month as well. We actually have 2 more, I think, this month. So check those out on our webpage, on our website or Facebook, and we will see you guys soon. Night.
Thank you. All right.